working in your community as a volunteer. Now, as a comic book artist, in my own community, I had many opportunities to work with local groups, local schools even, to go in and talk to classes exactly like this, and tell them a little about what I did, and encourage those who had some career in mind, no matter how difficult, to kind of seek it out and work at it. And 9 times out of 10, you know, it may work out by luck or chance or providence, or however you want to see it. But sooner or later, you will fall in, if you have the desire, you will fall into some area of interest that is important to you. And not only did I go into some of the schools and talk to the kids, but for local groups, like if they were doing, there was a group in a town near us, Ellenville, New York, that had a run every year to raise money. And so I would like design the t-shirts for them. And I found that all the artwork that I did for free, if you want to put it that way, it really wasn't free, because there was a tremendous satisfaction and benefit from what I got back from the people that I did the volunteer work for, that it made those kinds of jobs the most exciting and the most valuable types of work that you can possibly imagine. In other words, you feel very good about it. When you're doing work for a paycheck, even if it's work that you like for a paycheck, it actually, I mean, I have found, and even though you need the paycheck, you need the money, it takes away somewhat from the actual work, because sometimes your eye starts to focus on the money and not the thing that you're actually loving to do. So I would encourage everyone here to, if possible, you know, find areas in your community where there's a need, and to apply your own skills. You don't have to have special skills. All you have to do is, that's the beauty of it. There's no qualifications except to just be yourself. And it works in a lot of areas. It works in an awful lot of areas. I was a volunteer at Ground Zero in New York City during the 9/11 thing as a chaplain, actually, through the Red Cross, which had a 24/7 coverage of the recovery of human remains at the site from the beginning to the end. You know, while one group, construction people, were removing debris, there was another whole group that was seeking the remains of victims of the attack that would be returned to their families, so that there would be some sort of conclusion for them as to what happened to their members that were lost. And I found, and there were people from all over the world volunteering there. You probably couldn't think of a country where there wasn't somebody volunteering. Not just the United States, not just the U.S., but there was a construction company driving big trucks hauling debris from Poland. And none of them spoke any English, and they just operated on their own, you know. And there were groups from, there were police departments from Texas, and there were Canadians and Mexicans, and there were people from Asia that had come to volunteer. And it was like it was almost in the midst of this, like a scene, especially at night with the floodlights on, a scene from Dante's Inferno, with such, it was almost magnificent in its appearance, the environment that we were working in, that it was, and that coupled with the people that you met and were able to talk to and exchange ideas, it was an overpowering experience. It was probably the most incredible thing I ever, and I'd spent a year in Vietnam, and that, maybe we shouldn't say it with reps from the U.S. Embassy.
It's okay.
This,
You're free.
this semi-disaster. It was just the most incredible thing I'd ever been involved in, and it actually encouraged me when they had closed it down, except for some minor stuff, that back in my own community I volunteered, which I had been thinking about for a long time, but I was so busy doing freelance work and making money, you know, putting 3 kids through college eventually, and I was so busy doing that kind of thing, and the roof over the head and the food on the table, that I never quite got around to it. Well, that volunteer work motivated me to do something local in the same area. So I volunteered for 3 years for the local ambulance service, and where we were on call certain hours of the day, certain days of the week, you know, working with other local people, many of which that you probably would know, not you would probably know personally, but as a volunteer, being members of the community, you would know them because they lived in the same place you did. And, you know, we would, in the midst of my work, the BlackBerry would go off and it would be your signal. You'd run to the squad building, call out the ambulance, the crew would show up and off you'd go. And it was very, very exciting stuff to do. Some of it was more exciting than others, but there was an incredible sense of accomplishment doing this. And I've known people who have been EMTs, you know, medical individual people who were basic EMTs, paramedics, and so forth, that have been doing this for their entire lives. They started as teenagers in the community, and now they're, you know, maybe 40, 50, 60, 70 years old, and they've done thousands of local ambulance calls and gone to the various hospitals taking these patients. And it was, again, that was the most exciting thing. The only reason I needed to stop is because we moved, and I couldn't make the calls anymore. I was in the area, but I was too far away to actually be there in time to make the calls. But that was one of the total highlights of the work I did while I was actually still drawing comic books. I didn't, it didn't take away from the work I was doing. You know, it's funny, if you volunteer, you think, well, I'm not going to have time to do it. But it doesn't work out that way. It seems you have almost more time. Time seems to expand somehow. It's like, you know, some sort of quantum mechanics thing, you know, where it's just, it opens up a universe of possibilities. And, you know, and it gives you a feeling that, you know, you don't sit around bored. You never get bored. First of all, if you're on call, especially for volunteer medical services, when that thing goes off, your heart starts pounding, you know, and then you drive to the place of the ambulance and then go to the scene. And I mean, it's a very, very exciting and fulfilling thing to do. But there's other things besides that, you know. There's all kinds of things, especially locally, where people are, if they're not in desperate need, at least they need certain services supplied to them that maybe the government doesn't do well enough. And you can contribute to that kind of giving. And, you know, saying that, I'm not really a giving person, you know. I'm very, you know, involved in myself, because when you work in a business like comics and you're a freelance artist, you're working at home. I mean, the advantage was I saw my kids grow up. I wasn't off to a job every day. But on the other hand, you basically work in isolation. So as a freelance commercial artist, it's kind of like everything is about you. You know, I mean, that's just, happens to be that way. And you may socialize and go to a movie once in a while, but mostly it's about what you're doing and when the job is due and all this other kind of stuff. But I found that the two actually work together very well. You can be that way on the one side, and also there's another side of you that's able to reach out and make those two ideas come together and to work very well. So, I don't know. Does anybody, questions?